Personally, I have red dots on all of my pistols. For me, it is a faster target acquisition. I don't have to worry about aligning the rear sight with the front sight. But again, I have a lot of reps using a red dot. I think it's an advancement in technology, and I'm a fan of using them. And people will say, well, what about the battery? I'm like, yeah, you should maintain the battery life and also swap it out well before you think it's getting low. But also, if the battery were to go out or the thing were to fall off, I always have iron sights on the pistol as well. And I set mine up to be able to co-witness, so my presentation is always the same.
Andy, thanks so much for being here today, brother. I know you're a busy guy and we appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. My pleasure.
Hey, so when I first started listening to podcasts, I wasn't much of a podcast listener or watcher until this opportunity started to come up with Aimpoint. And then I wanted to educate myself, obviously. And you're one of the go-to guys that I went to as far as to try to learn about podcasting and what kind of style to have. And it's no, seriously,
that's a mistake.
No, it's different. And your humor is part of it. But no, brother, it's different. I mean, as a cop, I did a lot of teaching and stuff like that. And that's one thing about being in front of people, speaking to people or from an instructor capacity. Also did a little bit of outdoor TV stuff, but this is altogether different because you're sitting here, you can't be demonstrative. You sort of have to just use your words, and it's very challenging, but it's pretty cool. And I'm a big fan of the Cleared Hot podcast, which you host, and also Change Agents. You'll notice I kind of skipped introducing you as a 17-year Navy SEAL.
Thankfully, thank God. I'm so tired of that intro.
Yeah. I get it, man. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but I do like that a lot of people with your background, your military service would be very proud. And I know you are very proud, but that would sort of define who they are. And it's very refreshing that you're able to keep that like, this is what I did, but this does not necessarily define me. I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. I mean, I'm partially tongue in cheek when I'm saying, I'm exhausted by that intro. But there's a portion of it that is true. I don't want to only be known for that. And I was talking with my wife about this the other day. I'm looking forward to the day where I've been out of the military for as long as I was in. And let me see here. I got out in 2013, but so 2030, which is closer.
It's actually not that far. It sounds crazy far, but yeah.
It actually irritates me. I understand how calendars work. I just don't like the velocity that we're flipping through them. But I couldn't be more proud of the job that I had. I learned so many incredible lessons in life, largely through my own failures, that thankfully I had mentors that were helping me. Like, you take a kid bowling and they raise the little barriers on each side. And thankfully I had mentors that were helping me. But I mean, even if you did 30 years in the military, let's say you joined when you're 18, you're not even 50 yet. You have so much runway in front of you. I am just trying to take every opportunity I can that is through the windshield and spend as little time possible looking in the rearview mirror. I'm very proud of the experience. I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish, but I would be really happy that on my headstone someday, it's like the bottom bullet point, if not on there.
That's very cool. A lot of my friends I was a cop for 26 years. A lot of my friends, we can retire when we're 50.
Okay.
And some of these guys do, and we have a pretty good pension. I'm a Northern California guy, like I know you were too originally. But we have good pension in California. So a lot of guys will take their pension, retire when they're 50, and move someplace where that pension is going to go a lot further for them. But I think it's sort of a dangerous thing to be retired when you're 50. And it's cool to do something else, but just to not do anything, you're going to start to deteriorate, and it's going to be pretty rapid, I think, as far as mentally, physically. And that oftentimes I've seen can lead to guys starting to drink beer at 10 in the morning and stuff. And it's just a kind of not a smart way to go about it. So I think it's important to stay busy and stay active. And if you retire from one career, it doesn't mean you're retired from life.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful with the words you use to describe yourself. Also, clearly, 10 o'clock is a Bloody Mary or a Caesar.
Exactly.
I don't know what kind of psychopaths are drinking beer at 10 a.m., but, live your life however you want to. One of the biggest things I think that anybody who comes from a career that has a uniform specifically attached to it is that you can butt up against feeling as if you have lost your purpose. And I get that. The cool thing about the military, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, to include myself necessarily when I was in, is that you have a purpose, but you're working inside of an entity and organization where they're building the ladder for you. These are the steps you need to take progression wise. This is, I don't know how it works for law enforcement, but in the Navy, it's an Excel spreadsheet. You're an E1 until you do 2 years. And then if you have a pulse, you're an E2. And then if you have a pulse at the 2-year mark, you're an E3. And then it spreads out a little bit more. You have to take tests and things of that nature. But it's all an Excel spreadsheet. So the advancement ladder, you have people that are farther in their career and you're looking at their steps, and you can paint this path of where you want to be if you want to emulate somebody's career, and pair that with the sense of purpose. And then you leave that and you realize, oh, I need to figure this out on my own now. Now I need to build my own ladder. And that can be really tough. I mean, I say this to people and they don't believe me, but I am accidentally doing all of the things that I do now. If you would have asked me a few years before getting out of the military to write down, honestly, I would usually say 10 things, but I could probably extrapolate that out to 100 things. Like, take a day, write down 100 things that you think you might be doing for a living. Not a single one of the things I do right now would have been on that list. No joke. And that's just from trying to figure out what it is that I wanted to do, or what would work and what wouldn't work. And, for me, one of the things I identified early is I need to work for myself, which can be difficult, right? You're the warden of your own prison, but you get to move the walls and windows if you don't like the view, right? They have nobody to blame but yourself. But then you are responsible for creating your ladder. You're putting it up on the wall to climb whatever mountaintop or building it is that you want to be. And you can't point your finger at anybody else and say, well, you didn't do this for me, because it's on you. And that doesn't work for everybody. And that's totally fine. But it's tough if you specifically from uniformed based jobs.
Yeah, and it seems like sort of the more vested you are in your career in uniform, with you operating at a very high level in SEAL teams and stuff, but even to a degree, police chiefs or police captains or administrators, there tends to be that identification with that profession. And then when they leave, it's like, dude, retire, do something different, but they still want to hold on to that rank or that status or whatever, which is, in some ways, we are what we do, I think, but we have to try to separate that. And I think one of the good ways that I've always tried to do that is just to have friends that aren't all SWAT dudes, that's tough, especially when you're in a teams, I'm sure, because those are the guys you're with all the time. But the more you could be around normal people, probably the better.
Yeah, I give people exactly the same advice, especially for law enforcement personnel, because I've seen the insidious nature of that from the SEAL community. And I don't mean it negatively, but I would go to work, especially when I was younger, and I would hang out with my best friends. We would always go to lunch together. Then we would come back to work, where we're talking about work stuff, obviously. Then, if the day ended at Y, we would go drink together, either at a bar together or at somebody's house. And if it's the weekend, it's barbecues and stuff like that. But it's all work, guys. So you're talking about work in your off time. There is no work-life balance. It's work-work balance. And for clarity, that's exactly what I wanted it to be in that phase of my life. That's all I had ever wanted to do. I was working with people I considered to be my absolute just legends and heroes. I was so happy to be a part of it. But now, being away from it, you can see, and I see it in other people, specifically my law enforcement friends now who locally where I live, I try to tell them, try to have a social circle that is completely detached from anything that you do and play a game with yourself. How long can you go in that social circle without bringing up what you do for a living? And it's challenging. Yeah, it's challenging, but it is essentially important. I would say more, and you don't have to do this for your entire career, but I would say once you realize you are in a tunnel, and that tunnel is leading you towards retirement, and maybe you can start seeing a glimmer of light, 5 years before you get out, start building who you are outside of what it is that you wear to work.
That's excellent advice. And I try to tell, the young guys, like you said, they're all about it. They don't even have hobbies.
We all
work is their hobby.
Yeah. And I get that.
And we get so much training. I mean, look at all the training that you had in the SEAL teams, and he was a cop. You get a lot of training, and it's like something is going to be of interest to you. Are you interested in accident investigation and reconstruction and all that? Well, guess what? There's jobs you can do in retirement to benefit from all that free training and all that experience that you acquired over your career. So I think that's absolutely great advice, Andy. I want to talk a little bit about your childhood. I read that you grew up in or near Santa Cruz, California.
Yeah, in Santa Cruz. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I've been there several times as a kid. I grew up in the
It's a little
East
weird,
Bay.
isn't it?
It is. It's a different place, man. It really is. All of California is, but
Santa Cruz. Whew, yeah.
It's, even between California, though, the whole Northern California, Southern California thing, it's a tremendous difference. So, but talk a little bit about growing up at an early age. Did you know that you wanted to be a Navy SEAL?
I did. And, now knocking on the door of 50 almost at this point, I still am not really able to articulate it any better. I don't have an exact why it got its hooks into me. But Santa Cruz is a fascinating town. I describe it as a great place to grow up and an even better place to leave at some point. And I have nothing against the people. I mean, I'm such a huge fan. People, just live your life, however you want to live your life. I just have had really interesting conversations with people that I went to high school with in Santa Cruz that never left, and their view of the greater world versus I can't even keep track of how many passport stamps I have at this point, let alone, I'm on my third or fourth passport at this point. It just gives you a different optic. So it was a spectacular place to grow up. And my family, specifically my father and his father, had deep roots in Santa Cruz as well. I was born in the same hospital my dad was. Different building, same, they moved Dominican Hospital to a different location. But, my grandfather built the high school that my dad went to, so it, like, deep ties in the community, very hard to get in trouble, getting rides back from high school parties in the front of the cop car instead of the back, always appreciated.
Yes, for sure.
And he was a mason. My dad was a brick and stone mason, as his father was before him, and his father was before him. And I actually don't know how the family fell into that trade, but it has been for as far back as I can trace it. So I grew up on, construction sites when I was really young. We moved briefly out of Santa Cruz up to Sebastopol, which is right by Santa Rosa. I'm sure you're familiar with where that is. And I was at a Pop Warner football practice. The one year my mother would allow me to play, she signed the permission slip. And it felt like somebody had their hands on my shoulders and they were shaking me. And it was the Loma Prieta earthquake with 89, which the San Andreas runs damn near right through Santa Cruz. So it just nuked everything that was brick and concrete. And so obviously there was a flood of the trades back. That's what brought the family back to, and we were only gone for about 2 years from when I had grown up there. So back there, and there was just more work than you could shake a stick at. So in all of my off time when I was younger, I was working with my dad. He was in the Navy as well. He was in the first squadron of patrol boats that operated in Vietnam. So I ended up working with the Mark Vs. He was on the Mark Is, which was the first brown water Navy patrol boat that used a jacuzzi jet instead of a propeller, which the Mark Vs still go off of that. They use a jet propulsion instead of propeller propulsion. And he was not a SEAL, obviously, but he worked alongside of SEALs because the riverine environment, which is, what the SEALs, especially in the Vietnam era, were focusing on, was the maritime environment. That was their way to get in and out of where they were going to insert and extract. So a peripheral knowledge of who they were and what they did. And I don't know why he particularly brought it up. I don't think he probably thought it was something that was going to be of deep interest to me, but the concept of it was just fascinating, even at that young age. And again, I don't know why.
How much was the movie with Charlie Sheen an influence?
I saw that. Don't get me wrong. I've seen that movie thousands of times. But I had already made the decision to dive headlong into that path before I saw that movie. So, it definitely was like throwing gasoline on a fire. I wish it was even remotely accurate. I tell people the only accurate scene in that movie is the opening where he wakes up just completely shit-faced in the surf. That is relatively accurate. The rest of it is this combination of like 50 people's careers. But yeah, it's got its hooks into me, and which was very atypical, as you can imagine, from Santa Cruz. Somebody wanting, not that Santa Cruz is anti-military by any stretch, even though I'm sure there are some people there who are pretty devoutly anti-military. I never had anybody express that to me, but a lot of people just kind of raising their eyebrows and questioning, like, well, why would you want to join the military? It was not a common theme growing up. And then I get into the teams, and almost every person that I worked with had that similar story of like, yeah, I don't really know why. But when I heard about it, it became fascinating to me. And I have to explain this concept to my children. I went to a place called the library and was reading books about it and finding books about it. And again, the same story from almost every person that I worked with. And none of us really know why.
Yeah. And the military is like, when you ask someone who's a Navy SEAL, where'd you grow up? Santa Cruz is definitely not the first thing that comes to mind. It's more like from for people who are not familiar with it, I mean, Santa Cruz is just a laid back surfer town.
You would expect people to be part of a hippie commune.
Yes.
You came from Santa Cruz.
Absolutely. So your career, you were a Navy SEAL for 17 years, tons of accolades. I don't want to get into all that. I know I'll let you talk to that if you want to. How was being a Navy SEAL different than what you thought it would be? Or was it different than what you thought it would be?
I don't think I had any idea of what I was getting into. And I don't know how anybody really could. I mean, I would imagine without knowing you that being a cop was everything that you thought it was going to be. And then a bunch of stuff you never even could have imagined. And I would describe the SEAL community the same way, especially, 5 years after I joined the military, September 11th happened. So I joined in 96. And, I had already been a SEAL for a few years. I had done 2 peacetime deployments, which is basically they were just forward stages for 6 months as a little bit of a global response element. My words, not necessarily the Navy's. And then 9/11 hits, and obviously you switch from a really conceptual idea of the job to a very practical execution of the job. And I couldn't have imagined, the SEALs are supposed to be, and they are, the premier maritime force for the United States Navy. And I deployed to largely landlocked countries my entire career. Never did a single waterborne operation. I fell into some water, some very unclean water at times, but, never threw on a dragger or a set of diving gear to prosecute a target. So all of this training based on Vietnam tactics, rivers and stream crossing, and over the horizon and over the beach training. And they're like, yeah, cool. So Afghanistan, don't need the Zodiacs, probably can leave the swim fins at home. Dive mask optional, depending on what you want to do. And just, and on repeat until I ended up getting medically retired. I did 1 month shy of 17 years. It was 16 years, 11 months and 1 day. So I figure it's easier to say 17 years and then the government can spot me that 1 month.
That's a good run. And I know that you were injured in combat. You took a round in the leg. Is that correct?
In the hip. Yeah. High hip on the left side of my body.
And there was some concern whether or not you'd be able to come back, and you did come back.
Yes.
Physically and mentally, what was that recovery like?
Slow. There was, I still deal, I have, I would say a neuropathic deficiency in my left leg to this day. The impact of the round was not awesome by any stretch of the imagination, but the neuropathic issues, it interacted with my sciatic nerve somehow. And the doctors don't know. It's like, it could have been the shockwave associated with the round passing near it. It could have clipped it. It could have been a piece of shrapnel. And then honestly, it doesn't even matter. It fried it down to my ankle. So for about a year, I had drop foot when it first happened. Recovered usage of my leg to about my knee pretty rapidly. I mean, I'd estimate within a few days, but then just horrible ankle issues. I can't dorsiflex I couldn't dorsiflex my ankle for probably 2 years, which is a problem when you're either walking or wearing shoes in general, or even, let alone trying to put your kid on and run. So the rehab from it was, nerves regrow at 1 millimeter a day or 1 inch a month is what doctors have told me for years. And at some point, this is what you got. So I kind of figured out ways to work around it, and it did improve. I can dorsiflex my ankle at this point. It's definitely not as strong as my right leg, and I still have issues. I'm very careful if I'm doing any lateral movement because I can roll my ankle to the outside very easily. So uneven terrain, I'm cautious with, but I mean, I live a very full life. Don't get me wrong, but it took years for it to get to that point.
Yeah. I mean, that's another question I wanted about your childhood. Were you always sort of a daredevil or what? I mean,
I don't think I'm a daredevil now. People say that. I'm like, what I do is exceptionally normal.
I think Evil might hesitate a little bit to do some of the stuff you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about some of that stuff. So you're a pilot, helicopters and fixed wing, right?
Yep.
Very cool. You also jump out of planes and have done that forever, obviously. But
I'm a fan of testing gravity.
You also, I believe, still have a world record for wingsuit diving, wingsuit jumping. What do you call that craziness?
That was a wingsuit skydiving record, I believe. So it was broken about 3 or 4 years after I said it, and then a Red Bull guy just smashed it. He had a plane that was capable of getting higher, and he had an amazing tailwind. And don't get me wrong, he's a world-class pilot. He smashed it to the point I don't think anybody will break it again.
Wow, it was like the perfect storm, huh? Everything.
Yeah. Which I wish I would have had those conditions, and we timed it around trying to have those, but sometimes the winds aloft just don't participate. So you got what you got.
And you did that particular jump to raise money for the Navy SEAL Foundation?
Yes. And so this goes back to, how do you find purpose when you're out of the military? Because I got out in 2013. That record jump was in 2015, late August of 2015 specifically. And the reason that I wanted to do it is that I, just like a lot of people do, if not most people, or potentially even all, for a certain period of time, you sit there on a job that sometimes could make the news, and then you realize that you're just on the couch now, and you're limited to being able to watch the news. And it's a tough thing to do. I didn't necessarily want to be done with the military, but my body, specifically it was my ankle, that there's just no way I could have continued my operational career. I would have been a risk to myself and everybody else around me, which I cared more about the latter part of that than I do the risk to myself. So I didn't want to be done, and I wanted to still have a fight, be involved in the fight in some way. And I realized, absent being able to do it myself, I mean, what better could you do than support families? Because that is an aspect of this, and I bet it's true in law enforcement as well, that they're often very forgotten. The toll that it takes on the family unit, specifically military. I'll be honest, I think law enforcement has a more difficult job than military because, yes, I did very long deployments, and for a period of time, they were very frequent. But when I left, I checked in for work, and then I checked out for work, and I came home. You guys, with all my friends, I mean, first off, you work largely where you live, which is a huge difference from where I was. I was thousands of miles away from where I lived. So I didn't have to drive by every day and be like, oh, I remember that wreck or that person that I had to pick up off the side of the road or this, that. And you're dealing with people that are in your community. And for the cops and first responders that I know, there is no off. Like, if you're out and about and something happens, they're going to respond because that's their role. So there's no off switch. So you guys are, 24/7, 365. I mean, yeah, I did some long deployments, but then after that, like, nobody's calling me if a house is on fire or there's an active shooter or, there's a drunk dude down the street that needs to get taken to the drunk tank. Like, I'm calling you guys.
I think it's different, different types of stress. I think, does this sound fair to you that, like, law enforcement over the course of a career may have a lot of sort of a lower level stress? Of course, there's going to be pursuits and there's going to be spikes in that, but you're not in a combat zone. You know what I'm saying? Whereas you and
but you might be.
Like you might be.
You're right. You might
be.
And that's the difference. Like, for me, I just was home, we would go do training, but I'm not worried about getting an IED initiated complex ambush when I'm living out in Chula Vista in San Diego. I mean, if we're getting to that point, things have gone super, super bad as it is, So, yeah. Whereas, I mean, for cops, that's the thing. It might be low level, but man, that anxiety is there because you never know. And we live it, this better than most people. Crazy people do crazy stuff. And you guys are the ones who get called to deal with them.
Absolutely. Andy, let's talk a little bit about podcasting, how you got into that, and maybe talk just a little bit about each of your two podcasts.
Sure. I got into it accidentally. Again, it was a recommendation from Joe Rogan, who I'm not unique in any way, shape, or form that he had made that recommendation, but I met him at the tail end of the fundraising for that record jump back in 2015. And a buddy of mine named Tate Fletcher, who I met randomly, the very first podcast I was ever on was called the Wadcast Podcast, which was a CrossFit-centric podcast. I drove up to LA to do it, and Tate was on the show. It was the first time I'd ever met him. And he and I hit it off, and he stayed in touch, and he introduced me to Brian Callen and Brendan Schaub. So I did The Fighter and the Kid, and then Tate was on Joe's show because they'd been friends for years. I don't know, maybe 6 months later, and he mentioned the idea of bringing me on. So the first time I ever did Joe's show, I did it with Tate. Tate and I were on there together. Stayed in contact with Joe. He had me come back on, I think it was a year later. And after that second show, after we were done, he's like, you should consider starting a podcast. And I mean, here's how behind the times I was. The first time that I ever went on Joe's show, I had never listened to a podcast in my life. I did not understand the size, scope, and scale of what it was. And that was back then. I mean,
When
now
was
it's
that?
orders of magnitude.
What year was that, Andy, you think, the first time?
15.
Oh, okay.
2015. So again, it wasn't nearly the size that it is now, but was still at the top of the heap back then. So I took his recommendation. I was working with a brand called 511 Tactical, which will be super familiar to the law enforcement crew. And I was one of their ambassadors. And the guy I was working with was like, well, why don't we buy you a podcast kit? Like that can be part of our, brand ambassadorship. So it was a super easy little Zoom microphone with 2 microphones that connected into it with little, 6-inch standing pedestals that I would put a 5-pound Rogue Fitness weight on to hold him still. No video any way, shape, or form. And then it just started from there. And again, I would never have thought in a million years, you go back to this list, 100 things that you think you're going to do with your life, none of them, to include podcasting, would be on there. And so at my own personal show, I don't know, I think I probably started it in 2017. I'd have to go back and check. I'm not even sure. And it evolved and has evolved and continues to evolve from there. And a couple of years ago, actually probably about 4 or 5 years ago at this point, I met the IRONCLAD crew working through the SEAL Foundation. It was the very first time I was ever introduced to them. It actually might have been all the way back in 2015 with the record jump. I think I first got at least introduced to them. They've come out since. I was working with Blackhawk at the time. They did a content series out here. So met Jeremy and the crew, and they pitched me the idea of Change Agents coming up on 3 years ago now. So I liked the concept. They handle the back end production stuff, which is the one thing I'm not good at that at all. I don't have the time to put all that stuff together. So the way that they presented it was basically just what we're doing right now. It's my opportunity to sit down and talk with people that I consider to be really interesting about topics that I find to be interesting. And that's kind of my litmus test in life on what I'm going to do. Am I legitimately interested in doing this? Is this something that I want to allocate my time to? Because to me, that's the most valuable resource that we have.
Yeah, I want to hit on 2 things. One is that you keep mentioning like all these opportunities that happen almost by chance. For me, I was never really a gun guy. Like I was a pretty good shooter for a cop, and I'm still no world-class shooter. But if you'd told me, 15 years ago that I was going to write for Guns and Ammo and host an Aimpoint podcast, I thought you're crazy, because my background is all martial arts stuff. And the gun stuff I kind of got into by chance. And there's all these weird meetings where if you look back and it's like, dude, if I wasn't at that event and didn't meet that guy, I would have never had this opportunity to do this and this and that. And it's pretty neat how all that stuff sort of comes together. It makes you wonder, is it really all happenstance, or is there some kind of purpose? So that's maybe a little too deep, but
I don't have the answer to that for sure. But yeah. I can tell people, once you start saying yes to opportunities, it's fascinating to see the direction that it can take you. It will take you to places that you never imagined possible. And then you have to master the skill of saying no, because if you don't, you'll be completely task and time saturated.
Absolutely. In the beginning, you're afraid to say no because it might not happen again. You might not get another opportunity, but you can absolutely. And I think I've sort of worked through that a little bit too, where I extend myself so far that everything sort of suffers a little bit. So you got to try to find that balance. But then I look at guys like you that are doing 10 times more stuff and managing it. So I'm like,
I'm not, man. I'm telling you, I have a really small triangle where I live. My wife is a high level jiu-jitsu athlete and coach. The jiu-jitsu studio I train at is off my right shoulder, about a block away. I literally walk down an alley past a police station and a firehouse, make a left-hand turn. I'm in the podcast studio, and then the coffee shop is a block and a half, literally behind me. And I just try to stay in my little triangle, man. It may look like I'm doing a lot. I don't know. Maybe I am, but to me, it doesn't feel like I am.
It's funny. I heard you the other day on a podcast talk about, I think you said you called yourself an aggressive hobbyist when it comes to jiu-jitsu.
100%. My wife is a competitor. I'm like, I might not come to class this week because I don't feel like it,
Yeah, I get it. I'm excited, man. I've been a stand-up student of stand-up martial arts my whole life. And now I'm just going to start to, I'm going to sign up.
Is that a weird way to say karate?
Karate was the original thing. Yeah, it was for me. I'm 53. So it was when I was 12, the Karate Kid came out.
Yep.
And so that was my inspiration. All things martial arts. I wanted to be Eastern. I completely dismissed boxing and wrestling and anything that was Western, to my detriment. But that was just kind of how things evolved. And then later, as I got older, became a cop, I started realizing that some of that stuff was a little more esoteric than what I was looking for, to be able to control suspects who are non-cooperative on the street. And I'll be honest with you, the arrested control training that we were receiving at the time was like watching a bad Steven Seagal movie. You know, it's like not going to work against someone who's resistive. So I got into the combative stuff, trained a lot with a guy named Kelly McCann, who's kind of on the forefront of the combative movement and stuff. He combines boxing and Muay Thai and all that stuff with stuff that's kind of very, very loosely based on like World War II combatives, but it's pretty cool stuff. But I've always had this lack of ability on the ground, or lack of experience with the ground. So a buddy of mine, Cecil Birch, just opened a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy here in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy here in Anthem, Arizona, which is near where I live. And so yeah, I'm going to sign up to support him and
hell yeah,
get in a little bit better shape and all that stuff. So 53, starting something new, but hey, if you don't
found
start
it at 40. Yeah, I found it at 40. You'll be totally fine. Just take a really low trajectory towards a distant horizon.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it feels like you're just drowning in information when you first start, and it's going to feel like that way for a couple of years, and then it slowly starts to make a little bit more sense. I mean, don't trust me. It's people are like, oh, how do you do this? I'm like, I've never even heard of that. You need to go ask a coach, because I tell people ask me, well, what's this? I'm like, please go talk to your coach. I'm not a coach. I come in because I enjoy it. I get to hang out with my wife. Go ask somebody who gets paid to do this, because I don't.
Yeah, very cool. I got a buddy that has kind of a similar martial arts path as me. And he's been doing it for maybe a year or two now. I think he's a blue belt, but he's like, dude, you're going to really like it. And for me,
it's fun.
It's just the new challenge of it all is something that I really look forward to. And I know it's going to make me well-rounded, because as much as I would like to not be on the ground, the bad guy has a say, you know, and I'm not fighting suspects these days, but you might, you know, as a private citizen, you just never know how things are going to go. And you should always have a plan, no matter where the fight takes you, I guess.
Yeah. And I always try to remind people, there are people who are just religious about every type of martial art, you know, to include jiu-jitsu. And I don't know, I'm probably at 6.5 years of training jiu-jitsu. It's an incomplete self-defense system, as is everything.
Yes.
You know, the karate, Muay Thai, the stand-up, all the stuff you did, that's awesome. But it sucks if somebody gets into grappling range, because you may not have a choice of being put on the ground. And the other side of that coin is people who devote their life to jiu-jitsu, but they ignore striking range. Like, you might have a black belt with all these stripes on it, but if you're face down unconscious because you got a left hook that just took you out of the game, like, cool story, your arm bar is amazing. Get back to training in 8 weeks when your jaw is unwired and you can actually chew solid food. So it's a mix, you know what I mean? There's no magic out there in any of this stuff. I hate to tell people, but I just enjoy it. Like, for things that you said, it's exercise for sure. You're going to work on your flexibility, whether you want to or not. And it's a challenge.
Assisted flexibility.
For sure. What I like about it is that I don't think it can be solved. There's just no one answer for everything. So it's this constant journey of learning. And I'm coming to the conclusion that I think learning new things as you age, and just continuously trying to learn things or go at stuff that you're not very good at, is the key to at least mentally staying young.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. What about shooting these days? Are you kind of like, you've done enough of that, or are you still at the range quite a bit, or are you doing any instructing?
I don't do any instructing. I shoot enough to be competent. I mean, I don't need to anymore be out running around under nods doing, very complicated squad or individual movement technique type stuff. I don't routinely, practice clearing my house. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can't turn my brain off to a degree, and I understand the angles and I view it from that lens, but I say current and competent with both pistol and rifle platforms, but I just, you know what I mean? I just have found things, and where I live, in Montana is a constitutional carry state. So I think you get a ticket if you don't have a gun. And I carry every day, not because I'm looking to get in a gunfight. I'm actually looking for every reason in the world not to engage somebody with a firearm, or with my hands, by the way, either. I'd more than happy to just walk away and not get involved in anybody's BS, but sometimes you don't have a choice in that. To me, firearms are an incredibly impactful tool. That's all it is. They're just a tool. But I came from a background where we developed a really good understanding of their capability, a really high level of currency and competency. And so it's something I feel very comfortable with. in an environment where you need that tool, I would like to be able to be there to help others.
Yeah, they say it's like what is it? High risk, low frequency where you could use your firearm, whereas it's a much higher chance that you're going to use an empty-handed response. And I always encourage people, because it seems like a lot of folks are one or the other. They're a shooter or they carry a gun and they think, well, if I get into trouble, I'll use my gun.
Guns aren't magic either.
Exactly.
Guns can create
in close quarters, maybe you can't draw it, or you do draw it, and now this guy's grabbed a hold of it, and now do you have a weapon retention solution? And there's just so much to it. But you're right, in the right circumstance, it's like the best tool you can have, as a private citizen, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason they say don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Yeah. And again, the statistical odds of a civilian needing to be able to respond in any way, shape, or form to some type of active shooting threat or an environment where a firearm would be called for are so astronomically low. But I don't care. It costs me nothing obviously the price of the firearm and holsters and stuff like that and the ability to train. But it's again, because of my background and I am comfortable with the fact that it is a tool and I know how to use it appropriately, there is more cons than pros to not carrying.
Yes. And then it's if you're not carrying, and you could have, in other words, you're not out at a bar drinking, or you're somewhere where you could legally carry and it would be smart to carry, to not be carrying, and then some active killer event goes down. I'd
never be able to forgive myself.
Exactly. And so I think that a lot of cops and obviously SEALs are the same way, are going to intervene whether they're armed or not. I'm not saying in every situation, but I'm saying if innocent people are being injured or killed, a lot of us are going to intervene. So you might as well make sure you're armed so that you have the best chance of success during your intervention.
I would agree. Yeah, I don't think I would be capable of sitting by and watching something like that happen. And I can't even fathom the regret or guilt that would be associated with, what are the odds, right? The classic, what are the odds? Well, the odds are not high, but again, crazy people do crazy things.
When it happens, it's 100%, right? I mean, the odds were 100%.
Yeah, to be like, the odds of getting bit by a shark in the ocean are like the same as being struck by lightning twice. Well, tell that to the dude who's trapped in the jaws of a great white.
Yeah.
Let me know how he feels about the odds.
Brother, are you a hunter? Did you grow up hunting?
We moved out of California briefly when I was very young. We actually moved to Missoula, Montana, which is about 2 hours south of where I'm at right now. But I was so young, I remember it snowed. Not a whole lot of core memories for me. I know that my dad hunted while we were up here, and I went with him one time. And other than that, I don't really remember being exposed. It was certainly not an anti-hunting culture, but again, in California, where my dad's, throwing up, fireplaces and retaining walls 360 days a year because the weather is fantastic. Not a lot of hunting, right? And I didn't get into hunting until I got up here into Montana and got introduced to some people who were deeply into the hunting industry that, again, mentored me, just totally pulled me underneath their wing. And what really got me interested in it was bow hunting, just because it's so ridiculously hard and you got to get so close to these animals that are switched on and, just predisposed to paying attention to everything. It's super challenging, impossible to master. And so again, I wasn't avoiding it when I was younger, but it definitely, I look forward to September and October every year.
I bet. Are there any correlations you think between kind of tactical movement and stuff like that you learned in the teams to maybe stalking an animal? Or
learning how to read terrain, and use cover and concealment or dead space, all that stuff is still accurate. Being comfortable with GPSs, with maps, understanding where you are, being able to look at overhead imagery and put together a plan okay, this is here. This is going to be the most effective way that we can approach. And when I do approach, this is what I should probably expect. So, it's not like it gives you a 10x multiplier on your likelihood of success, but the aspect of being outside and, trying to be quiet, being cognizant of where the wind is, being cognizant of, dead space, what can you see, all, using shadows to your advantage, that stuff all still applies.
I want to talk to you a little bit about optics. Obviously, Aimpoint is a sponsor of this podcast. And what are your thoughts on red dots?
I mean, this is an interesting one. I personally, I have red dots on all of my pistols because I transitioned over to red dots years ago. And there are some people who are really against it. And I'm not one to tell. I mean, people ask me, is this a good tactic or a bad tactic? And I say, does it work? And they're like, well, yeah, it worked. I'm like, okay, then let's not say it was good or bad. Let's say it was effective. And let's maybe look at if you can refine on top of that, right? Like, I'm not here to judge anybody Monday morning quarterback. If you don't train with a red dot and you just were to slap one on a pistol, yeah, you're going to have some issues probably with presentation and being able to actually locate that red dot because it could be a slightly different presentation angle. But that's the same thing as learning on iron sights on a pistol too, the very first time you pick it up. And people forget that you can set these things up so you can co-witness. So you could present with your normal iron sight presentation, which should be ingrained into you. And then boom, there's your red dot right there. For me, it is a faster target acquisition. I don't have to worry about aligning the rear sight with the front sight. But again, I have a lot of reps using a red dot. I think it's an advancement in technology and I'm a fan of using them. And people will say, well, what about the battery? I'm like, yeah, you should maintain the battery life and also swap it out well before you think it's getting low. But also if the battery were to go out or the thing were to fall off, I always have iron sights on the pistol as well. And I set mine up to be able to co-witness. So my presentation is always the same.
Yep. No, I agree with that 100%. Were you using red dots on pistols in the teams or no?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Let me see here. I stopped carrying a pistol eventually, just because Afghanistan was my last deployment and we were at much more, we were beyond pistol range.
Sure.
The only thing I would have used the pistol for would be like as a hammer, essentially at that point to like break a rock. But we were I have had red dots on rifles for as long as I can remember. But yeah, I don't remember. No, because I was still shooting with the 226. Yeah, it was all iron sights.
What's your take on like a red dot on a rifle versus a low power variable optic?
Again, it's like, what's the use case scenario? Are we talking a patrol officer? Are we talking about a guy for home defense? Are we talking about something that's going to go on a shotgun? Is this a hunting rifle? Like hunting rifle, probably don't need a red dot sight. You know what I mean? I'd go with something, a variable optic that you can back all the way out. So if you find something at 100 yards, you're not like looking at blades of grass. But if you find something at 400, you can dial it back in. Whatever people choose, just make sure you train on it. Just be competent with whatever it is you have. And not everything works for everybody. Like there are different in, whatever, arm length, cheek weld. Like I get it. There's so many individual things and some people get really dogmatic about stuff and they really love particular things. My answer to that is awesome. Just make sure you master it to the best of your ability.
I'll tell you, the fact that like virtually no manufacturer has pistols that don't have slides cut for an optic is a clue that they're sort of catching on in the handgun world. I really noticed a huge difference a few years ago when I was doing a gun test and I was in an indoor range and suddenly for the first time, I couldn't get the front sight in focus and I put my readers on. Well, now the front sight's in focus, but the target is out of focus. And I don't mean the way it's supposed to be, like slightly out of focus. I mean, what the hell am I aiming at down there? So it's just such a simple solution for me. And it kind of cracks me up that the people that are so against red dots, it's like, and many of those people, by the way, have changed their tune in recent years and now are seeing the benefit of a red dot sight. But like you said, I just think it's an advancement of technology. And why would you not afford yourself every advantage that you can have on a potentially life-saving tool?
I think so too. And instead of arguing with people about it, people will find their way. They'll get there eventually. And like, hey, if you want to be a cop with a revolver, I mean, okay, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, but you are inherently accepting a greater amount of risk. It's the same, it's like, well, just because there's new technology out there doesn't mean we should use them. Like, well, why are you using a semi-automatic pistol then instead of a 6-shooter revolver? You know what I mean? Like, why does your magazine have 21+1 now as opposed to the 6 that you used to have? And, you had these your little side saddle bandolier of speed reloaders. I'm like maybe because it's better,
Well, you had that. Yeah. The dump pouch was a huge advancement. My buddy's dad, where you have that pouch upside down on your duty belt, pull the thing, and now you have rounds in your hand. Like that was an advantage, back in the day compared to. Yeah. And as bad guys evolve in their tactics and their equipment, so must we. Kind of as we're winding down here, brother, talk a little bit about, because I know you were privy to some equipment back in the day that other people couldn't access when you were with DevGrew, right? When you guys are getting all the top gear basically that no one else even knows about.
Yes, but so development group, people focus on the kinetic aspect of that.
Okay.
Part of the charter is actually to develop tactics, techniques, and procedures, and a lot of that is equipment as well. So it's not that. I guess there is some truth to say that other units weren't allowed to get their hands on it, but it's not because they didn't want to. It's because by doctrine, conventional SEAL team is limited in what they can purchase, but development group by doctrine can deviate outside of the parameters. Like, this is a military item. Like, that's what's going to be able for purchase in a conventional SEAL team. And this is a gross example. I'm not getting into the minutia, but the conventional teams, I'm sure they would have loved to have the stuff, but they didn't have the money to get it. And it hadn't gone through the appropriate testing to become a military, you know what I mean? So development group had, one, a much larger budget, but they had by doctrine the authority to deviate outside of what was just designed for military use. And that was a cool aspect of it as well. A lot of it was, I would say, materials that reduced weight. Like a ballistic helmet, as an example, that looked a lot more like a half shell skateboard helmet than the ones that came over the cups of the ears. And then those continued to get lighter. Standalone body armor, right? That could be multi-strike 7.62 versus having to have really thick, plates that used to have metal on the back of them with a Kevlar weave up front and then soft armor. So it was more and again, once we settled on something that was awesome, then it could go into the military pipeline. So there's a whole aspect of that command where by design, you're supposed to be testing and developing. And then this is my guess, and I don't know if this is backed in actual data, but I'd say 3 to 5 years later, after they find something that they really like, it might find its way into the conventional military's hands, which is exactly how the system is supposed to work.
Yeah, that's very cool. So, I mean, the type of things you're looking for other than weight savings are like, how robust is this product, right? Durability, batteries.
You're beating the crap out of everything. And it was cool because you could look out into an industry and say, pick whatever dive fins. What's the best dive fin out there? Let's go buy every single dive fin that we can find. And we're going to test all of these things. And then we'll make a recommendation that the community should buy these 3 and focus on those. And you could extrapolate that out for everything, whether it be night vision, helmets, uniforms, Cry Precisions, right? Like those are like the standard, military special operations uniform at this point. They were wearing those years before. And I think Cry was actually directly selling into those JSOC commands specifically for that purpose years before the conventional military got a hold of those things because they had the authority to buy them directly.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
No, that is, I believe it has an unobtainium weave that really,
trying to sell those to our administrators and let them know why as a SWAT team we needed that was challenging, but we eventually got them to cave in.
Yeah, especially when they can go onto Google and pull up something that looks almost identical that is 1/8 the cost. Yeah, the struggle is real.
For sure. Well, Andy, thank you so much for being here today, brother. Hey, what do you have coming up next? I know you're doing the podcast and all that stuff, and where can people go to find out more about what you're doing and what you have going on?
I mean, first off, I would not recommend anybody go figure out what I'm doing or what I have going on. But I exist on all the social media platforms, and it's all a version of my name. I'm probably the most active on Instagram just because I guess pictures are easier for me than anything else. But it's just my name, Andy Stumpf 212. There's the Clear Top podcast, the Change Agents podcast. The rest of the year is I got hunting right around the corner. In the fall every year, I kind of disappear for a little bit. I got about 60 days to fill the freezer for the rest of the year. So I got to really allocate my time. And it gets jiu-jitsu heavy as well. Like I was just at a jiu-jitsu camp for a week. I'm home for a week, gone up in Maine at the Origin Jiu-Jitsu camp, leaving again on Saturday. So just kind of cruising along, still exploring. I'm new to the rotary wing aviation game, so really exploring that. It has been fascinating. And again, talk about something I don't think you could ever master and you could spend your life trying to learn more about. I think that's exactly why I like it.
Yeah, no shortage of hobbies, and you are taking many of these to like an elite level. So kudos to you for staying.
I don't know about any of that.
For staying so active.
I'm just trying to stay alive.
Well, no kidding. When you're jumping out of an airplane, yeah, I'm with you on that one.
That's easy.
But
that's easy one.
Andy, thank you so much for being here today, brother.
Yeah, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Guys, that's a wrap for this episode with Andy Stumpf. If this episode resonated with you, be sure and let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Aimpoint's Taking Aim podcast. We'll see you next time.